Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to create highly specialized AI agents by giving them access to your own fine-tuned models. Now, I really wanted to make this video because in my opinion, fine-tuning has been really underused and is actually extremely powerful for many different use cases. And I think it is because most people are a bit intimidated by the setup and most tutorials out there are code-based. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your own fine-tuned models without code. And secondly, I'll show you how you can give your AI agents access to multiple specialized fine-tuned models, which opens up a whole range of very interesting use cases. I recently, for example, delivered a content creation agent to a client that had access to 5 different optimized fine-tuned models, each trained on the past post, tone of voice, and style of each of their different social media platforms: LinkedIn, X, Instagram, Facebook, and their blog. And the results were pretty amazing, both to me and the company. And by giving one agent access to all these different fine-tuned models, companies can create and post hyper-optimized and brand-aligned content across all their platforms by simply interacting inside of one chat. But you can imagine there are many more interesting use cases and possibilities with this setup. So if you finally want to learn how to fine-tune the easy way and learn how to build specialized AI agents, stick with me and I'll show you how to do it. So I've broken this video down into 4 steps. First, I'll show you the content team system overview, because I think this system will give you a good insight of the possibilities for this setup and the use cases for this setup. Then I'll give you a quick example of a fine-tuned LinkedIn post writer agent that I just recreated for myself quickly. So you can also see the difference between a normal model output and a fine-tuned model output. Then I'll give you a very quick practical breakdown on what fine-tuning actually is, when to use it and why to use it. And lastly, I'll show you step by step how you can fine-tune your own model. Now, before starting, I'm very excited to announce that I just launched my community. I'll be sharing everything I've learned. All my templates will be available on there too. And really, I'm there to help out with anything I can. But it really is about for anyone who sees the potential in this and wants to become one of the first experts in the AI agent field. Because if you jump on this bandwagon right now, you will be one of the first experts, which in my opinion, ideally positions yourself when this market matures and the AI space actually takes off. So if you're interested in something like this, I have more information in a link in the description below, and I would love to see you there. Anyway, that aside, let me get to the content team system overview. As always, I built this system on Relevance AI. If you're completely new to my channel, this might go over your head a little bit. It's not the easiest setup. So if it's hard to follow, make sure to check out my beginner's tutorial on Relevance AI. I do have many other tutorials on Relevance AI too, but I'll try to keep it straightforward and simple. Now, if you've seen my previous video on the AI agent social media team, this is quite a similar setup with a few slight adjustments. But the way this system is set up is here we have our triggers, here we have our content manager agent and his tools, and here we have the sub agents with their specific tools, right? So in this case, I've actually set this agent up inside of their Slack, which I notice is a very interesting use case to delivering these AI agents to clients or to companies, because instead of having to manage another software, they could just, whenever they need their agent, they could just open their Slack channel of their agent and basically instruct them what to do. And it sort of makes sense because most people already manage sort of their employees or their colleagues inside of Slack. So it makes sense to sort of put these agents inside of their Slack too. So the way the system is set up, it could basically do 2 things, right? It can either repurpose content based on long-form content like YouTube videos, podcasts, or blog posts, and basically sort of repurpose that across all the different social channels, or it can generate posts from ideas, right? So someone could just have an idea, write it in the Slack channel, and it will start generating posts for the different platforms based on that idea. So the way this in practice works out is in the following way. You can see here I have the 2 different triggers, right? Generate from idea or repurpose content. Right now, that will be sent to the content manager agent, who has 3 main responsibilities. Now, the first one, as always, is to delegate this task to the right sub-agent. And you can see each of the sub-agent is basically a specialist in each of the platforms, right? So we have our blog writer agent, our X writer agent, LinkedIn writer agent, Facebook writer agent, and Instagram writer agent. Now, they're all set up in a very similar way. So for example, if we look at the LinkedIn writer agent, he has access to 3 tools, right? And this is really where the magic happens, because in his first tool, he will have access to the fine-tuned model, right? So the first tool is the LinkedIn Writer, and that fine-tuned model is trained on all the past LinkedIn posts of this company to mimic the style, tone of voice, and sort of length as much as possible on this specific platform, in this case, LinkedIn, right? Then the other tools he has are more for the repurposing, right? We have the YouTube transcription tool. So if we actually want to repurpose, it will need context on the YouTube video. So it will first transcribe to understand the context and then write the LinkedIn post, right? And the same for podcasts with the audio transcription. And I actually forgot one, which is a web scraper tool where it can, for example, if they share a blog post link, then it can scrape that blog post, understand the context, and then write the LinkedIn post. Now, basically, this is the way all of these agents are set up, but with the difference that each of these agents has access to a different fine-tuned model, right? That's trained on that specific platform's data, right? So that's the way this system is set up. So let's say our LinkedIn Writer agent writes a post, and then he reports it back to the content manager agent. And then basically his second responsibility comes into play, which is we've instructed him to always first report back that post to us. And that's why we have here a tool that's called Send Message on Slack. To make sure that everything's all right, we can check if we like the post, if we want to change something. And if we approve, we send it back to the content manager agent, and then he can perform his third responsibility, which is actually posting it to the different platforms. And that's why you can see he has these other tools: post to X, post to the LinkedIn, post to blog, post to Instagram. And again, I forgot one, which is post to Facebook, right? So that's how it's set up. You can see quite powerful sort of setup. And this is just one use case of using sort of these fine-tuned models inside of agent systems. But I can imagine there are many more very interesting use cases for this. You can, for example, imagine a customer service agent that has access to a fine-tuned model, so it can actually really respond in the tone of voice of a company, which is still really hard to do with normal LLMs. And you can also imagine that a combination of a knowledge base or a RAG, so getting the context of the context of the company combined with the tone of voice through a fine-tuned model, can also be a very, very powerful solution for companies. So unfortunately, but understandably, the company I built this for actually didn't want me to share this inside of this YouTube channel, and to recreate the whole system for myself would be quite a big job, especially considering that I have to fine-tune each of these different social media platforms, which would be quite a big job. So what I did is I basically recreated the LinkedIn Writer agent for myself, and through that example, I'll also share that template with you on the community, and also through that example, you understand how to do this for other platforms if you want to, and also how you could recreate this entire system. Because again, it's very similar to the social media agent team template that I do have available. So if you understand how to do this, you could set this system up for yourself if you're interested. Now, let me show you a quick example of the LinkedIn Writer agent I set up for myself. So here we are in my Relevance AI dashboard. Now here I have my fine-tuned LinkedIn Writer agent, and basically I copied that one and recreated another one, LinkedIn Writer one, which basically has access to a normal GPT-4o model, so not a fine-tuned one, just so we can check the differences in output. Now, for context, it's good to know that I trained this fine-tuned model based on LinkedIn posts that I like, which are sort of in the AI space, that are, the characteristics are sort of like these short, punchy sentences, very value-driven, and with a strong sort of call to action. If you're on LinkedIn, you probably know what I mean. But let's check. So here we have our non-fine-tuned agent, right? So normally, of course, this would be this agent would be instructed by the manager agent, but now we just, for example purposes, would do it on directly through the LinkedIn Writer agent. And let's say in this case, we want to generate a blog post based on an idea, not repurposing. We can say something like, write LinkedIn post on, let's say, in the era of AI, English is the new programming language. And maybe say, end with a CTA to my free prompting guide. All right, let's copy this and put in exactly the same prompt inside of the fine-tuned LinkedIn Writer agent. So let's check. And now let's check the difference. So here we have the non-fine-tuned LinkedIn post. So in the era of AI, English is becoming the new programming language. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve, the ability to communicate effectively in English is more crucial than ever. I'm already seeing that it didn't understand what I was trying to say. Just as coding languages like Python and JavaScript have shaped the tech landscape, the way we articulate our thoughts and ideas in English is now a key skill in leveraging AI tools and technologies. Whether you're crafting prompts for AI models or collaborating with teams across the globe, mastering English can... Okay, so yes, you can see it didn't really understand what I was trying to say. And second, I don't really like the tone of voice, especially for a LinkedIn post. It's not very engaging. And you've probably seen this, right? When you try to create content with ChatGPT for your social media or for your company, maybe it's very hard to get the tone of voice right. Even with a lot of prompting, it's very hard to get that tone of voice. And that's why I think it's such a good use case for these fine-tune models. Now let's check the fine-tune model. So here's a LinkedIn post. In the era, you can already see, by the way, that the sort of layout is very different, right? In the era of AI, English is the new programming language. The better you communicate with AI, the more you can automate. The more you automate, the more you can scale. The more you scale, the more you win. To help you win, I've created a free guide to help you master the art of prompting. I love it. You can see the difference in style. It's very different and way more the style I'm looking for. It covers the 3 types of prompts: how to create effective prompts, how to use AI to create your prompts, how to use AI to refine your prompts, how to use AI to create your own prompt library. The guide also includes a video tutorial and Notion template. To get access, simply click my name plus follow plus bell. Okay, I can already tell you this part directly comes from the training data, because this is sort of the style that I've trained this model on. Comment prompting on this post. I'll send you the link. PS, if you don't want to wait, you can grab it here. So yes, you can see the difference and the power of this fine-tuned model. It can really, enhance that tone of voice and really get it lots more like you actually want it. So I want to go over quickly what is actually fine-tuning, when to use it, and how we can set this up. So I want to go very quickly over the basics of fine-tuning. I want to keep it practical, so it's not going to be long, but you do need to understand it a little bit. So fine-tuning basically refines pre-trained AI models with specific data, right? So if you see the diagram here, we have a base model, just like GPT-4o, for example, that of course is trained on a huge data set. And then we have our base model. And what we do when we're fine-tuning is we basically refine that base model with a smaller data set to make it specialized on a specific task, right? So, and through that sort of specialization, we can of course get increased accuracy on those specific tasks. Now, important to note, you get increased accuracy on those specific tasks, right? Because you actually get decreased accuracy on any task that's not related to your training data. And you'll lose that. You get that decreased accuracy on these other tasks very quickly, right? Even with a small data set, like 500 or 1,000 data points. Now, lastly, some people have some confusion between fine-tuning and RAG. Now, the difference is very easy. Fine-tuning actually adjusts the underlying language model, while RAG, or knowledge base, just adds context or knowledge to the base model, right? So it doesn't actually change the underlying model. It just adds context to it. And why do we actually fine-tune? Now, I got this from the OpenAI website, but I tried to put in an example for each one. Now, of course, the first one is the one I've been using, which is setting the style, tone, format, or other qualitative aspects, right? Of course, I think this is one of the really powerful use cases that's actually already working pretty well, which is, trying to get brand-aligned or persona-aligned content out, right? Or you can even imagine inside of chatbots, this can also be a very interesting use case, right? Now, secondly, there are more, right? But secondly, you have improving reliability at producing a desired output, right? So you can imagine if you're looking for always have a very specific output, you can imagine that if you train a model based on that specific output, you get high reliability in getting that desired output, right? So for example, an e-commerce product description, right? It always needs to be in the exact same format, length, the different sections, right? And you're using a model only to do that, well, then it makes sense to fine-tune it to get that reliability higher, right? And then the third one is correcting failures to follow complex prompts. You can imagine, you've already experienced it probably, large language models struggle with very long prompts. And if you need to do very complex things, you can better probably fine-tune a model or to get those sort of specifics inside of a very large prompt. I think some of these use cases you can also attack with chain prompting, of course, breaking down a larger prompt into smaller prompts and put it in a chain. But you can imagine they, for example, had an example here, detailed technical manuals, right? And then the fourth one is handling many edge cases in specific ways. You can imagine these base models are better at sort of these broad knowledge and generalized knowledge. So if you need to do something which involves a lot of edge cases, you can imagine it's probably better to train a specific model on that sort of smaller data set with the more edge case data, right? For example, diagnosing rare or complex medical cases that fall outside of the norm, right? You can imagine a base model would have a hard time with it because it would first look at the general and the broad picture. While if you're really looking for identifying those specific medical cases that fall outside of the norm, you can better have a fine-tuned model that's specialized in recognizing those diseases, right? And then the last one is performing a new skill or task that's hard to articulate in a prompt. Now, a lot of the fine-tuning that people are doing right now is with images, and this is a very good use case for that. You can imagine it's very difficult to describe in a prompt. You've also probably also experienced it to let a model generate a specific type of image you want, right? It's hard to do that in language. So you can better train or fine-tune a model by showing it the actual images of the type of images you want in your output, than doing it through language with prompting, right? So I think this is also a very interesting use case, especially for the image generation fine-tuned models. So you can see here, customizing a model to create artwork in a specific, hard-to-describe style. Now, what are some of the limitations right now of fine-tuning? Because there are limitations still. And the main ones are really, first of all, overfitting. And overfitting basically means overly specialized, right? So it basically, as soon as you start sort of training this on this specific task, it very quickly, even again, with 500 to 1,000 data points, start to struggle with generalization or new or unseen tasks. So any task you haven't traded on. And therefore, these models become very limited in terms of their flexibility. So it's very important to keep these models very specific to a specific task, right? And then the second thing is, which also happens quite quick, is forgetting, right? Models very quickly lose some of the broad knowledge they originally had, but because they're focusing so narrowly on that specific data set, right? So you can see this also happening. I've seen it happening, with 700, 800 data points. It already starts hallucinating, completely stop making sense, and putting in weird symbols and things like this. So this will happen quite quickly. So again, you have to sort of find this data set size, and I'll tell you my recommendations later to get these models right? And then the last one is, of course, data dependency. The output the model output of your fine-tuned model only depends on the quality of your data. The quality of your data has to be good if you expect a good outcome. And second, as I said, the quantity of data is very important, right? So too much data will mean more forgetting and more overfitting, so more specialized, which could be good for some use cases. But if you still need some broad knowledge or general knowledge, then you need to go lower, right? But if you go too low, then it will not perform the way you want, of course. So you have to sort of find that sweet spot. And I'll tell you the sweet spot I found for getting sort of that tone of voice right. So how do we actually fine-tune, and how do we actually fine-tune without code? Now, there's two main ways. The first one is with Replicate, right? I really like Replicate. Basically, Replicate makes it really easy for you to fine-tune your models. And the cool thing is you can use all these open source models. You can use Llama, you can use Mistral, you can choose the model you want to fine-tune. And you can also use images, video. You can really do anything you want here. And then they make it also really easy to export your own fine-tuned LLM into an API, which you can then use wherever you want. And you could also, for example, export it into Relevance AI. For example, you can see there's already a lot of people making fine-tuned models and putting them public here on Replicate. So you can see take photos in the style Ready Tokyo Nights. So they have many of these image models, but you can check it out. They have some cool fine-tuned models here already available. But in this specific use case, in this video, I'm going to do it on OpenAI. Why? Because it's actually completely for free to fine-tune your models, the GPT-4o and GPT-4o Mini, until the end of September on OpenAI. And it's quite an easy process, even easier than on Replicate, I'd say. So we're going to do it on OpenAI. And lastly, how do I actually set this up? There's basically 4 steps involved. And the first one is the hardest one, which is preparing our data set, right? Now, the second one is converting that data set to a JSON-L file. And basically a JSON-L file is what these models expect to be trained on, right? So I'll explain in detail how you can do this later. It's not that difficult. And then we have to actually train our model. And lastly, I'll show you how you can give your trained model or your fine-tuned model to your agent on Relevance AI. Now, before doing that, we actually have to decide which data set we're going to go for, the size of our data set. Now, as I said, take this with a grain of salt. There's no hard science, and you sort of have to play around with this a bit, but I have been doing it for quite some weeks now. So in my experience, what I found for this specific use case, which is matching a tone of voice, we need to go for a data set between 100 to 1,000 data points, right? And this is still quite a broad range, so I wanted to get even more specific, because what I've been seeing is even if you go close to the 1,000, right, or the upper hundreds, let's say, you already start losing a lot of this general knowledge. It starts doing some weird things sometimes or putting out weird symbols. So if we go for the content generation from ideas, if that's your main use case for this fine-tuned model, then we want to go a little bit on the lower end of our data set. Why? Because we still need a little bit of that broad knowledge and general knowledge. We don't want it to start hallucinating and stop making sense. So if you want to sort of do it like I did in my example, then probably a data set between 100 and 300 would work better for you. It will get the tone of voice pretty good, and it will keep making sense, right? But for repurposing, we can actually do it on a little bit of a bigger data set. Why? Because when we repurpose content, for example, blog post, we give the LLM, the model, a lot more context on what we want our post to be about, right? So it has to do less thinking in terms of generating, and it needs less knowledge, right? So therefore, we can get away with a little bit of a lack of broad knowledge, and therefore we can train it on a little bit of a larger data set, right? So I put in there 300 to 600, right? Now, even if you go over that, it starts. I was pretty surprised how quick it loses sort of that general knowledge and starts doing weird things. So now I'll take you step by step through setting up this LinkedIn data set and actually fine-tuning your model and giving it to your agent. Now, as I said, the hardest thing is actually preparing this data set. Of course, we don't want to start manually copying and pasting these LinkedIn posts or whatever posts we're trying to gather to a data set. So in this specific one, for the LinkedIn one, I actually set up a tool that will help you scrape LinkedIn posts and automatically update them to a knowledge base inside of Relevance AI, and we can then export it into CSV, which we can then later transform into JSON-L. But the reason I could do this in Relevance AI is because they actually have built-in LinkedIn post scraper, right? So I'm going to share this tool with you so you can use it yourself, and it'll basically allow you to very quickly create this data set for you. You will have to change one or two things, so I'm going to show you that right now. So I'll put that link of this tool in the description here below. For the other platforms, Instagram, Facebook, X, the blog posts, I actually used make.com to get that data into a spreadsheet, and I'll make sure to share those templates in the community. So anyway, if you've cloned your tool, you will come to a screen like this, right? Which is the build screen, right? And basically the tool works like this. We have 3 user inputs, right? You can either choose if you want a company or a user LinkedIn URL. So which type of profile do you want to scrape, right? A company or LinkedIn. So let's say in this case, we want to do a company. Then we have to add in, very simple, just the LinkedIns of the companies we want to scrape. So let's say, just for example, we're going to scrape 2 companies. So we're just going to scrape HubSpot and maybe Pipedrive. Not a good example, because of course these are competitors, but it's just an example. So we put in these LinkedIn URLs just here and HubSpot. And then we can decide here the amount of days in the past we want to retrieve these posts from. So for example, we only want it from the last 4 months. So we can put in 120 days in the past, right? So this tool's already set up for you. The only thing you will have to change here is this third step, which is called insert data to knowledge, right? Now, because this will actually upload these scraped LinkedIn posts onto your knowledge base. Now, of course, this is on my knowledge base, which will not be available on your relevance. So you have to click here on create new, right? You can call it whatever you want. Fine-tuning LinkedIn, right? Create table. And I will upload it to that knowledge base in your Relevance AI account. Now here, actually, I used a little bit of code to transform that scraped data into an array of objects which we need for uploading it to our Relevance AI knowledge base. And here you can actually change, you will have to change the amount of LinkedIn post per LinkedIn URL to retrieve, right? So let's say you want to do 50, but you can change this to, if you want, to a different number. So that's what we do. So let's say I want to do 100 for now, 50 for each company. And what we do is we can just run it. So it's scraping all the profiles. Now it's transforming it into the right array of objects, right, to upload it to our knowledge base. And here you can see it's inserted it, so we can see it now. And we can see now we have all the scraped LinkedIn posts here in the knowledge base, right? We owe, official apology yesterday video, yeah, whatever. So from here we can just export it into a CSV. So that's what we do. So now we've downloaded it, and we just have to do one more thing, which is actually adding 2 empty columns, right? Before we take the next step, which is transforming this into a JSON-L file, right? So we just open a Google Sheets. We import the CSV we just exported, right? Oh, it's still loading. All right, so we add that one. And then we can delete this assistant row, right? We don't need that. And then we're gonna add in, because these are basically the tool outputs, right? Or the model outputs, right? But to train these models, we also need the prompt, right? For these outputs. And we also need the system message or the system prompt, just like the role prompt in this case. So we're gonna leave those empty for now because we're gonna add in those later. So we're just gonna add in two empty columns on the left, right? And like this, we're just going to export it again. So LinkedIn, fine tune, whatever, HubSpot, right? So we go and export this into a CSV. Right, now the CSV file, and now we have to convert that into a JSON-L. Now the easiest way to do that, which I found, is through a platform or a website called Novel Crafter. I'll share a link in the description below too, where they have a very simple tool to do this, right? So we can just upload our file here, right? So we upload our file, and basically automatically you can see it added in all these all the posts inside of the assistant message, right? And the assistant message is basically our output, right? Where you can see we also have the user message here and the system message, right? Which is the system prompt. Now, do we actually have to add in a prompt? I've experimented a lot with this, and in my experience, actually, I've tried sort of describing what the post is about, to maybe give it a bit more context. But actually, in my experience, it works best when you leave the prompt field empty while training this data. Right, so we're leaving that empty, and we're just going to add in a system prompt, right? So in this case, you could add something like, you are a world-class LinkedIn post writer. You just give it a role, right, with some characteristics, the post it's writing, right? So normally you could sort of check what kind of posts you like, right? What sort of the characteristics of them. In this case, I haven't checked, but let's say for HubSpot and Pipedrive and whatever, always use emojis, right? Really bad prompt, right? But you understand what you should do here. For example, the other one I got use short, punchy sentences, value driven, always include CTA. So you can sort of look at the posts and describe the characteristics inside of the system message, right? So once you've done that, you can then click on set for all, right? And then it will automatically set the system message for all of these different posts, and the user message we leave empty. Of course, you could try, maybe in your experience, it works better if you actually put in a prompt, but it also saves time. And then we can here just click on download JSON-L, right? And that's the type of file we need to actually start fine-tuning our model. Now, we have our JSON-L file. all we do now is we go to platform.openai.com. I can imagine you have an OpenAI account by now. If you don't have, you can create a free account. And then we go here to dashboard. And in your dashboard, you can click here on fine tuning. And this is for free, right, to do until the end of September. So really recommend to try it out. And all we do here is we click on create. And there we can first choose on which base model we want to fine tune our model on. And then here we can upload our training data, which is of course our JSON-L file. So I don't know why it's not loading. I'll do the JSON-L file first. Try again. Yeah, now it's working. So you can choose your model here. I'd recommend choosing GPT-4o, best model, and it's for free anyway. I don't think even on these data sets we're using, which is like a few hundred, this will be actually very cheap, even if you have to pay, it will probably not be more than a few dollars. So you upload your JSON-L file, and the rest you don't really have to touch. You can change the name here if you want. So we can say something like Pipe Drive, right? And the seed, you can ignore this for now. Of course, you can play around with it when you get better, but you don't have to really touch this. And then you just click create. And then it starts fine-tuning your model. Now, this will actually take some time, right? So on a data set like this, 100 probably takes around 20 minutes to 30 minutes. But of course, if you have a bigger data set, it can take up to a few hours or a couple of hours. And you can actually, when it's done, sort of play around with it here in the OpenAI playground. And you can also sort of compare it to the original base model to see the differences. And if you like the model, and then once you like the model and you actually want to give it to an agent, I'm going to show you right now how you can do that, right? So it's not extremely straightforward in Relevance AI to get access to your own fine-tuned models, but I'll explain right now how to do it. So if you're in your Relevance AI dashboard, actually, I will also share the tool of this one in the description below too, so it makes it a lot easier for you to do this yourself. So, but I'll still show you how to do this because you will have to adjust some things. So unfortunately, we can't actually use the LLM step inside of Relevance AI, right? Because normally you can see LLM. We can actually choose our model like this too. But the problem is it won't allow us to add in our own fine-tuned model. It will only allow the major model. So instead of the LLM model, we actually have to use an API step. Now, again, I will share this template. So all you'd have to change here, because all of these were already configured for you, is the API key here, right? So behind bearer, you will have to add in your personal API key from OpenAI. If you don't know where to find it, you can go back, and here you have a section with API key. There you can generate it, and you add that in here behind bearer, right? Make sure to have a space, and then put in your API key. Then this you can leave the same content type, application JSON, and the authorization. And then here the body type is raw. And then we have to add in this JSON string, which basically has a few things. The first one here is the model, which you would have to change, right? So this part you change out for your own fine-tuned model. Now, where do you find that number? Really easy. You go here on your fine-tuned model, and here you have the name of the model, right? So you copy this and you paste that in there, right? And here you have the system prompt, right? Which you can add in here too. You can just write it in, right? So you probably want to change this too. And then lastly, here we have the content, which is our prompt, of course, right? Which prompt are we going to send to our fine-tuned model? Now, in this case, I've given, of course, my agent access to write this. So my agent just adds in the prompt into the variable right here at the user input, right? And then we pass in that prompt to the API to actually get the outcome of our fine-tuned model. Now, I actually add in one more step, because unfortunately this API step, the way we're doing it, it can't accept like these special characters or, you know, bold or things like that. It will give an error. So I just added in one more step here, which is before it actually calls our fine-tuned model, we pass in that prompt, which he gets from the agent. Below you'll see a prompt. The only job is to take out special formatting for the prompt below. Do not change anything or add or take away any text, right? So then we actually pass this variable inside of the API call, right? And we do that here by just adding it in the strings, right? And adding in the variable, right? So that's the way you can also change the max tokens here, right? We can add that a little bit to that, and you can change the temperature. Not recommendable, especially if you're using these fine-tuned models, because they will start hallucinating very quickly. So that should be it. Lastly, you can actually change the output, right? Because in a normal API call, you get a response body, which is sort of a piece of code, etc. All we want back really from this step is a message, right? The output of our fine-tuned LLM. So the way you do that, you'll see that when you do this, you'll actually have two other outputs, which is the response body and another one, the status. I think you could just take those away by clicking on this here, and then you can add in a new one, right? Add new input, and there you just add this one, right? Which is the message, right? You'll find that in your variables, right? I don't find that right now because I haven't run it, but you'll find it once you've run it. And then you can add that, and then you can change also the name here, message. And then basically what it will do is we'll only output message there. And that's basically the output of our fine-tuned LLM. We don't want really anything else. So that's it. That's how you set it up and give it to your agent. Quite straightforward and easy, I think. The hardest part, again, is preparing the data set. But I think really interesting use cases, especially for this tone of voice. I think you can really start implementing these things in your builds and to make them better. And yeah, I think these models will only get better, and this fine-tuning will get better. So I see a bright future in fine-tuning these models. And then, as I said before, giving agents access to this sort of knowledge bases, tools, and fine-tuned models, we can make these agent systems even more powerful. Now, if you're still with me, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're interested, please check out my my community. I'm really excited to get started and work together with you guys there. So check it out if you're interested. And again, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.